Hey, what's happening, buddy? This is Hayden with The Designer Who Codes. In this video, I want to show you how you can build an about screen we have here with a full-size graphic. And it's completely responsive, meaning when I go from desktop to tablet to mobile, it fits perfectly on any screen. We can double check that by going to Inspect and also checking that the Pixel 2 works. Even the iPhone 5 still works in this design, along with the iPhone X, and of course the iPad will work as well. What this design also incorporates is Bootstrap for responsive design, and also the little icons down below, we're going to bring in the font awesome icons and turn them different colors using CSS. We'll also bring in custom fonts via Google Fonts. So let's get started. All right, so I've got a basic HTML document here. I've got my doc type HTML at the top for declaration. I have the HTML tags top and bottom, and inside the head, I have to add some meta information to make sure that my page is becoming responsive. What I want to do is up inside the head, I'm going to say meta name equals viewport, and then next to it, I'm going to say content equals width, and then the width is going to equal the device width. What this is going to do is, especially when it comes to a mobile device, we'll use the width of the browser to determine how our site is going to be viewed. So width equals device width. And after that, I'm going to say initial scale equals 1. And I'll close it up. From here, what I'm going to do is I want to link my CSS file. I've got my custom CSS file in the same relative folder, but it's inside a CSS folder. So what I'm going to do is below the meta viewport, I'm going to say link rel equals style sheet. And after that, I'll say href equals period CSS and then custom CSS. This is where I'm going to put all of my custom designs in. Now, what I really want to use in addition to my custom CSS is Bootstrap's CSS. So let's over to Bootstrap and download this. I'm going to head over here. I'm going to say getbootstrap.com. And what I want to use in here is like down here, it says download. And down below, there's a little purple button that says download for the compiled CSS. That's what I'm looking for. So it downloaded the file, it went into my downloads folder. So let me go grab that. And what I get was when I download it, I get a JS folder and a CSS folder. I want to go into the CSS folder and I'm looking for Bootstrap min CSS. So if I scroll down, what I'm looking for is the bootstrap.min.css. I'm going to drag that into my CSS folder. So I'm going to grab the Bootstrap min, and I guess I'll option drag just so I have to keep a copy of it in this fresh section. And now I have bootstrap.min.css and custom CSS. So let's add this style sheet as well. I'm going to copy this link rel, and I'm going to put it above, and I'm going to change that custom CSS to now the bootstrap min.css. Perfect, bootstrap min.css. And when I save it, let's take a look at this page. What should change is that font should go from serif to sans serif, if I say it properly. Perfect. What I should see is a hello world. Let me show you the difference of these two. If I take out this bootstrap, you notice there is some margin spacing up on the top and to the left, and then that type is Times New Roman in serif. The bootstrap comes with its own font. I refresh. It looks good. Also, the reason why I put the custom CSS below the Bootstrap CSS is I want the Bootstrap to be the dominant CSS. However, I want to make my own custom changes. So when I put the custom CSS below the Bootstrap, that enables me to override anything that's inside the Bootstrap. We're not going to override too much, but we will change some of the font styling. So I want to make sure the Bootstrap is above the custom CSS. What I also want to do is while we're importing all the CSS files is I also want to bring in font awesome. So if we head over to font awesome, if we do a quick Google search, And if I head to Font Awesome, what I want to do is I want to start for free. I want to download the Font Awesome icons we're going to use on this project. So in the Font Awesome, I'm going to scroll down. What I'm looking for is this download button to serve Font Awesomes yourself. I'm going to click on this, and what I should get is a little download button that says download Font Awesome free for the web. Perfect. Let me go grab that file. And what I get when I download the Font Awesome free library is a whole bunch of folders, the attribution and the license. What I'm looking for is the CSS folder, and I'm looking for the all.css. I'm going to bring all the icons into this project. So inside the CSS, I'm looking for all.css. So I'm going to option for me on the Macintosh. I'm going to drag it in the folder, and I'm going to add the all.css as the very last one. So I'm going to copy and duplicate the custom CSS, and I'm going to change custom to all.css. Now we can't see this change yet, only because we haven't brought in our Font Awesome icons. But so far, everything's looking good. We head over to Drew Hayes, hello world, looking good. So we've brought in the necessary CSS files. The one thing I also want to do, since we're inside the head section, since we're almost finished with this area, is I want to bring in a favicon or an icon for this brand of Drew Hayes. So I have a demo file of Drew Hayes's big capital D. I'm going to bring in the PNG as the icon for this web page. So after the title, I want to say link, rel, and then icon. The type is going to be an image/PNG, and then href, I don't have the return key, is going to be image/drewd.png. All this icon is that if we come back here, refresh the page, we should see is Drew Hayes now has a capital D on his website. That's a different one right there. I'm going to keep this one right here. So hello world shows up, and then that capital D is available now as an icon. So capital B for Bootstrap. We have this little flag for Font Awesome and the capital D for Drew Hayes. We're all set with the head section. So let's move on down to the body and let's add some div tags. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out hello world. Sorry, you're going away for right now. I'm going to say div class equals masthead. I want to create a new class down the road. So I have to declare it in the HTML first. And I'm going to add a background image. So I'm going to say style equals background image, and then which background image? I'm going to say URL, put parentheses in there, add single quotes, and say period image. And I'm going to use the index image that I have. So I've got a picture inside my images folder, which I already was in the images folder, and it looks like this. So I'm going to add this picture in. If you notice in the beginning of this video, the picture was much darker. We're going to do it inside of CSS. We're not altering the picture, so you can always change it later on. So at first glance, this is a bright image. Then we'll go in CSS and we'll make it darker. So inside of here, I'm going to finish this little line up right about there. Now what I can do is I'm going to bring back, I will say test in this case, just to make sure I'm not changing or putting any specific content in right now. I just want to make sure that this shows up somewhere at the top of the screen. So if I save, let me close that picture. And while we're at it, we can close the other Bootstrap and Font Awesome. So perfect. What I get is a picture that goes across the top of the page. Well, per this instruction, it should be a full size picture where I want it to go all the way to the edges of this design. So let's do that. Let's head over to our CSS and adjust the masthead. So in the custom CSS, I'm going to say period for class name and say masthead, and then say width is going to be 100%. I can find the right percent key on my keyboard, and height is going to be 100 VH. This is different than 100% because that's essentially going to be a square, 100 and 100. So I have to say 100% VH, and then the background size is going to be a cover. It's going to fill up this entire space of 100% to the width and then 100 vertical height, which essentially means fill the entire browser. So I'm going to save that custom CSS. Awesome. Let's also close this bottom part too. Check it out. Now what should happen is our picture will grow and shrink based upon the relative width and height of this design. It's more about the height and the width combined as it goes in diagonal pattern. But cool, we have our picture set up to go 100% width and 100 vertical height on the height. Awesome. So let's come back to the index and continue on trucking. From here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a couple tools. So in the div, I'm going to say div class and add a black overlay. Because what I want to do with this one is I want to add almost a black screen overlay. There we go. I want to lay a black screen over this design. So that way I can change it to be lighter or darker how I see fit. If I did this in Photoshop, well, what would happen is it was a one-time change. I have to keep changing Photoshop over and over again. By creating a black overlay, now I can adjust that in CSS to how I like it. So let's add a black overlay to this design. Let's add the word test again. And what I'm going to do inside the custom CSS is add a black overlay. I want to make sure I spelled it right because I was mucking with the word overlay. Yep, it is spelled properly. And I'm going to say background color. And in here, I'm going to use the alpha, which is RGBA for red, green, blue alpha. And I'll say 0, 0, 0 for RGB. I'm going to use 0.5 to add a level of transparency to this color. Background color, then I'm going to repeat the same before. So I'll say height is equal to 100 VH and width is equal to 100%. That dang percent key gets away from me apparently. Now when I save this, check it out. We now have a black overlay. The word test shows up, so we have to fix that down the road. It could make it sure it's white, not black, but now the picture got darker. And if I change this to say 0.8, that's a much darker picture. And if I go like say 0.2, that's a much lighter color. So I found 50% for this example worked great. Your picture might be a little bit different depending upon how you want to set your design and your background image up for your project. So I'm going to head back to the index. Perfect. And inside this test section, I'm going to take out the word test and I'm going to add div class equals, and I'm going to say dflex. Now this class name actually corresponds to the Bootstrap. So dflex, so if I type flex Bootstrap, we're going to leverage the power of flex inside of Bootstrap, which is pretty cool. So what I'm going to do, and I'm going to double check because I am running latest 4. I was running 5, but I'm pretty sure it's working fine, is that we're going to use dflex to use it to push this design to the middle of the screen whenever possible. So dflex, and then after that, I'm going to say align items center and content, align item center space content box. Now we're going to create our own content box. Since we want to center this content here, we also have to add the dflex to the parent as well. So I'm going to say dflex up inside the parent of the black overlay dflex. And after that, what I want to do is I want to stylize this content box. So I'll close the div, maybe, and I'll say test. And again, we shouldn't see much change quite yet, except now the word test is now centered vertically. So I aligned items to the center. Pretty cool. So let's add a content box to put our content in. So in our custom CSS, what I'm going to do is create a content box. I will say content box. And in here, I'm going to create a max width of 700 pixels. And then I'm going to say margin 0 auto. What that does is center the box to the middle of the screen by adding auto margins to the content box. And since I know all my colors will be white unless I change them, I'm going to say color white for all the corresponding type. Now what I get when I refresh this page is the word test literally right in the middle of the page. That's great, but I got more work to do. So this is the first step to say, hey, is it working? Check the content box, looking good. So far, so good. I'll move this over a little bit more and move this over here the best I can. And now what I'm going to do is, after I've added the deflex, align, I've added the content box as well, what I'm going to do is create a container with rows and columns. And again, this is the power of Bootstrap, that we're going to use the layout, which contains the container, and using the grid with columns using rows as well. So now that we've got that, I'm going to go back to Drew Hayes. I'm going to do deflex, so right below the div class, I'm going to add a div, not the word test. Let's just make sure it doesn't get in the way. Let's say div class container, div class equals row. And now here's where my columns are going to go. So I'm going to say div class equals call SM and align. And this one's going to be self-center. This is also corresponding to the flex within the parent, which is up here at deflex. So column refers to the columns I'm going to create. I'm going to have two columns, text on the left and a picture on the right. That's going to align it to the center of the page. So what the align self-center does is that if any of the text is shorter than the picture, move it to the vertically middle of the area. So let's just say the word test for this one. And after that, what I just want to do is the next column is going to be my picture column. So this div class, we just need to say call SM. This is where the picture goes. So let's save that and see how it looks. What I should have now, notice how this test sits in the middle vertically of these two lines. Also note, this is the power of, let's get rid of this one right here. But now what I'm getting, let me make sure I got the right corner. I can't see on a dark background. That was smart of me. There we go. Maybe not. I'm trying to get that last little corner. There it is. So now what I want to do is I want to see how it moves. So a great part about Bootstrap is it has breakpoints. So what it is, you won't notice too many right now yet until we get all the way to the mobile design. And notice now that this is where the picture goes below the word test. The breakpoint was at beyond small. So if I bring up Get Bootstrap and I go back to that overview, where I'm looking at is the small size goes to 100% below 576, essentially saying basically any mobile site, if we do a quick inspect, the iPhone X, notice how it sits still in the middle of the screen. Let's also adjust to Windows so you can see it. So now we're making it so it all fits to the middle of the screen as best as possible. If we go to a Pixel 2, it fits. iPhone 5 fits fine. So all of our screens, iPad is not small, so I still have the test on the left. This is where the picture goes on the right. So we're looking pretty good. Now that we have our setup pretty much all set to go here, the next things I want to do is I want to bring in some information on this page and bring in the picture as well of Mr. Drew Hayes. So what I'm going to do is up inside the word test, I'm going to say H2, and I will say front end web developer. And we'll close the H2, and we'll say H1 will be Drew Hayes. Not with periods. Let's get that guy out there. Perfect. Drew Hayes. And now I'm going to do is I'm going to make up a paragraph about this person. So I have copy off to the side of my screen. I'm going to copy in. And let's take out that space. Perfect. I'm a front-end developer with over 10 years experience in HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and React. I've worked for such companies as Apple, Nike, Reebok, and Gap. I just wanted some basic information about this person. If I save it, take a look. Ooh, looks pretty good. We're going to change the types. I'm not worried about that right now. What I am concerned about is does it fit in the space that I want it to fit in, which is right here. Note if you want a larger picture or more type, you can adjust the 700 pixels. I just found that for my design, it went too wide at 800. And so the 700 number fit the best in terms of my design. Again, if you find you want to go a little wider or a little narrower, that's up to you. Your total choice in the matter, but I want to show you that the max width does change the look of it. And I found 700 to be the most appropriate for this design. So heading back, I added the H2, the H1, the paragraph. What I next want to do is I want to add some font awesome icons. So below here, I'm at a P tag to hold the font awesome icons in. I'm going to say I class equals font awesome for FAB, and FA Twitter is what I'm going to bring in, and FALG. And let's open and close it. And let's take a look and see how it looks. Oh, what did I not do? Did I not spell something right? And upon further inspection, I did make a mistake. I didn't need to bring in just the CSS for the font icon, but I had to bring in all of the icons as well, because the CSS just references the SVG files of the font awesome folder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder called font awesome. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring all the font awesome content over to the font awesome folder, and it should copy pretty quickly. And now I'm going to do is I'm going to move my CSS location of the all CSS not to the CSS folder. In fact, I'm going to get rid of it because that was a mistake on my part. And in the font awesome, what I'm going to do is now go into the all of the CSS. So what I'm going to do is that change this to now font awesome CSS all. That's what I really wanted to have, and I totally messed it up. My bad. Now what'll happen is that icon, check it out. There he is, Mr. Twitter icon. Now, how did I know to type that code? Well, part of font awesome, and of course now I close the font awesome icon. So fontawesome.com, I can search for icons of what I want to use. Now I want to bring in, for me in this design, Twitter and also GitHub, but you can also search for Instagram. And what happens is when you find the Instagram icon, up at the top, it'll say I class FAB FA Instagram. So if I were to copy this code and drop it in down below, what I'm going to get, there it is the Instagram icon. Now note how the picture is not as big, or the Instagram icon isn't as big as Twitter. That's because that you can use different sizes to bring in. So if I say FALG here, that corresponds to large. So if we do a quick Google search for font awesome icon sizes, we should get is a page of sizing icons. And you can choose which size icon you want to use. FAXS, SM, LG, 2X, 3X, 5X, 7X, or the whopping big 10X. So that's how I can control how big or small the icon is. Let me save this one. Let me just minimize this area. And now the Instagram icon is the same size. Now I don't want Instagram, so I'm going to take it out. But what I do want to have is I want the GitHub icon. So I'm going to say I class FAB, and this one's going to be FA GitHub and FA LG. And if I save, what I'm looking for, whoa, is not GitHub. Oh, FAV, not to be FAB. There we go. Now we're looking good. So obviously these icons are not really clickable yet because I haven't provided A tags yet for these two designs. So what I want to do is inside the paragraph tag, I'm going to say a href equals and https://Twitter. And then whatever username you want to have in there, you can add. And what I'll do is I'll close up the A tag. I'm going to cut this first I into the A tag. Then the second one down here, I will say a href equals https:// and then we can use github.com and whatever username you have for your GitHub account, you would add right here. Let's close the A and we'll cut this one, drop it in. And if we save it, now we should get our two blue colored icons. Now they're blue and they also have a rollover of a darker blue because that's the default link color inside of Bootstrap. The great part about using SVG files is they take whatever color that your link is. So down the road, we're going to change these from these blue to dark blue to white colored links down here, since those are the links we're going to have in our design. But we have to now edit some more stuff because right now I want to edit from top to bottom. I want to edit the H2, then the H1, then the paragraph, and then hit the Twitter and GitHub. So what I want to bring in now is some fonts for this project. I'm going to head over to fonts.google.com. And the font that I've picked out previously in this design is Montserrat. So if I do a quick search for Montserrat, this is the font that I like to use in my design. I'm going to select it and I'm going to use a couple different styling options. What I like about the Montserrat font is there's 1 to 900 for font weights. The only ones I'm using in this design are the 400 and the 200. So I'm going to do is I'm going to find the extra light 200, select this style, and then go over to the 400 and select this style. If you have bold weighted fonts, 400 is your default regular. Anything above 400 is deemed demi, medium, or bold. Anything below that is deemed light, extra light, and thin, going to 3, 2, and 100. So what I can do next is I'm going to use the import. I'm going to drop this into my CSS file. So I'll come over to the custom CSS, go to the top of the page, and drop in this Google font of Montserrat, both at 200 and 400 weighted fonts, because I want a thin and a normal weighted font. What I next want to do is I want to apply the Montserrat to the H1 and the H2. So I'm going to say H1, H2. And in CSS, that means I'm going to apply one style of design, or in this case, a font style, to both of them. So the CSS rule down below is font family Montserrat. I'm going to copy it and drop it in. And now what I get, if I come over to Chrome, is it looks pretty good, but I want the front end web developer to be the 200, and I'm going to keep the 400 as the H1. Just to make sure that the H1 catches the 400, I'm going to say H1 font weight is 400, and then the H2 will get the font weight of 200. And now what I get if I save this file, perfect. I get a 400 weighted font for Drew Hayes and front-end web developer at this size. Now to me, front-end web developer for the H2 is a little bit too big. I want it a little smaller. So what I like to use are the EMs at this point in time. So if I say font size and I say 1 EM, this drops it basically to its root level, which is that size, which it's pretty much the same size as the paragraph. That's way too small, but I want about 30% bigger. So I'm going to say 1.3 EM, and now we're looking pretty good. I want this front-end web developer to be important, but the H1 should always be the most important. So you look at Drew Hayes first, front-end web developer second, then the paragraph of text third. And also to me, this font's a little heavy in this design, so I'm going to add a 200 weighted font within the paragraph. If I scroll up and I say P, font weight is going to be 200. Bootstrap also comes with lighter weighted fonts as well. Perfect. That looks really good. Now for sure you see the H1 first, the H2 second, and the paragraph third. Now we got to fix these icons because they're a little blue. Literally, they're blue icons. I want to make them white because right now they're looking a little bit, well, blue. So I'm going to say A. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that I have some distinguishing color just slightly that identifies the difference between a not clickable area and a clickable area. So I'm going to say color RGBA. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say 255, 255, and 255 for white. And I'm going to say 0.5. And what that's going to do is it's going to create a little bit of a gray color right here. So even though this is white, this is going to be gray. Well, what happens is when you roll your mouse over it on the desktop version, the A hover is going to be color white. So now what happens is I still want to use the white color, but only when you roll your mouse over it. Thereby it shows someone that this is a clickable area because it's a little gray versus all of these are white. So this is looking pretty darn good, except we have to add the picture to this design. It's not quite working the way it is, but it is moving the way it is. So if you look at it, it moves back and forth. It goes bigger to smaller to smallest. So now notice that this is where the picture goes below everything else, which is exactly what I want. So now I'm bringing the picture back in. So I'm going to save the custom in case I didn't save it before. And the index is where I'm going to go and bring in my picture inside this design. So where it says this is where the picture goes, I'm going to take that line out and I'll say img src for source, and then go find that index image.jpg. Now what I have to do is also give it alt information. So I can say black and white photo of Drew Hayes. And then what I'm going to do is close it up. Take a look at it. And if I save it, whoa. Well, one, I used the wrong picture. I should have linked up the actual picture that I was thinking about and not the background picture. So the image that I really wanted to use was drewhayes.jpg. Let's replace that and fix it. Let's not use that twice. Perfect. Whoa. That's a problem. That picture's really big, as in too big, but Bootstrap fixes it for us. So what I can do is I can also say class image fluid, and that makes this picture not be static, but become fluid. Refresh, check it out. Now we're looking really good. Notice also that this text sits in the middle of this vertically aligned area. So this sits right in the center. If you want to go towards the top again, you can always take out align self center. And now we're back to the top. But I found for design reasons that this fits so much better in the middle. And the great part about it is, if we go back to our mobile site design, let's go inspect it, that now this picture fits in our design. Make this a little bit bigger so we can see how things are looking. Perfect. It looks great in the iPhone X. So let's take a look at the Moto G4. Ooh, slight problem. Drew Hayes is getting cut off and there's no more H2. Gotta fix that. And if we look at the iPhone 5/SE, oh, we gotta fix that too. So everything's not working quite perfectly for the mobile site yet. So we have to go back and do a couple of things. The first thing is I want to change this deflex up here in the black overlay to say DSE. md-sm-flex. This will be applied only and above the SM or the small design. So if I refresh it, check it out. Front-end web developer, the flex goes away below the small or comes in at the small size or bigger. So if I go back into inspect, we fixed something, but we haven't fixed everything yet because front-end web developer now shows up. However, if we scroll down on the iPhone 5, notice how the picture doesn't extend to the bottom part of this image. That's because we said the picture needs to be at 100 vertical width, which essentially means the bottom of the browser. So we come back to the mobile site, the bottom of the browser doesn't meet the bottom of the website. So we have to do a little fixes inside our CSS. So in the custom CSS, what I want to do is I'm going to head down to the very, very, very bottom. This is always where I put my media queries. I'm going to say media only screen and a max width of 570 pixels. Did I get the right number? Let me double check that. I'm going to check my Bootstrap, head over to my layout. And when I'm double checking to make sure the breakpoint is 576. So let me just change that from not 570 to 576, which means this is only going to operate below a max width of 570. So I'm going to say is Masthead is going to have an overflow of scroll. And now when I save that, that's going to push the content down and make the masthead even longer. So what's going to happen now is when I refresh the page, it should have worked. Did I not saying right? Oh, it helps if you say and, not an. There we go. Typo on aisle 5. So now you look at it looking pretty good. Now, obviously what I probably want to do is I want to add a little bit of margin space at the top. So since I'm going to add some more space, what I also want to do is I'm going to double up not just the masthead, but I'm going to say black overlay also gets the scroll so it doesn't actually go outside the area of the picture in that black overlay. I'm going to scroll this up just a little bit here. I'm going to say content, let's say period content box, and I'll add a padding top of, let's use 1 rem for right now. And padding, didn't catch, padding bottom of 1 rem. Now I could type that where I can keep the padding top and the padding the same. I want to keep them separate. So if you want to add a little bit more at the top or bottom, it's up to you and you can change it there. So we'll save that. Now we're looking much better. Front-end web developer, Drew Hayes. I scroll down, he's looking pretty good down below at the bottom. So far so good, but what I also want to do is this picture's pretty big. To me, what I want to see is a little smaller picture so it fits a little better in this design. So I'm going to readjust the picture just a little bit in my design. So I'm going to do is I'm going to say image fluid and then say padding 0 to rem. And let's save and take a look. And looks pretty darn good. The picture sits a little bit even on either side. I can scroll up and down if I had a small enough browser. The iPhone 5 has the scrollability. And when I go back out to the main size, I haven't touched this design one bit because I use the media query only screen and max width to affect all the specific designs when it comes down to the mobile design. What I like using Chrome's inspect for is I can check for all different size of screens of the mobile environment. So yes, having an iPhone X, I do have one here on my desk, is great, but now I can check the Pixel 2, the Galaxy S5, and I can also double check the iPad Pro. That looks fine there. I can check any device that I don't have sitting on my desk to make sure all screens work. And so far, so good. Well, we have the site built, but what I want to do next is I actually want to upload this onto some sort of web hosting to get this live online. So I'm going to use, if I have a different screen over here, let me move it over. And let me grab a new screen on my other computer. There we go. I'm going to say netlify.com. And if you're brand new to Netlify, that's totally fine. So I'm going to log in, but if you're brand new, you can click on sign up. I'm going to log in and it pops the sites. So if I want to drag and drop a brand new site to Netlify, these are my other sites I have set up to go. What I want to do is inside the site section of Netlify, at the very bottom, want to deploy a new site without connecting to Git? Yeah, actually I do. I can just drag and drop my site here to deploy this website. So if I go back out and I grab my 82 about landing page HTML CSS, and if I go where I can see it on the screen, if I drag this and I upload it, it's going to upload everything and push it out. Now, to me, this domain name, Relax Kalam, doesn't really do much for me. So I'm going to change the domain and I'm going to call this one, in this case, since we do have the name going, Drew Hayes, I'm going to say Drew Hayes about. And when I save it, now the name Drew Hayes about.netlify.app shows up. And sure enough, our website shows up on the internet. And you can go to drew-hayes-about.netlify.app and the site works. And if I head back over to Netlify, or excuse me, to Chrome, and I run a new page, shows up pretty good. And I can also double check, inspect to make sure everything's working successfully on this page. Awesome. If you want to know how to connect your website to a custom domain name in Netlify, I have a video right here. If you're all set, you're all set. Thanks much for watching. I am Haydn Adams with The Designer Who Codes.